Thanks for listening to the Media People Podcast, lively and insightful chats with the people who power the media industry. I'm your host, Victor Genova. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca or subscribe wherever you get podcasts, including youtube.com/@mediapeoplepodcast. Views expressed by participants are personal. As a marketer, overseeing a national brand can be a demanding ask, but leading no fewer than 6? That's a separate challenge altogether. And that's exactly what the day-to-day entails for today's guest, Cheryl Gresham. Cheryl is the Vice President Marketing CMO for Verizon Value, a division of Verizon Communications serving value-conscious customers looking for the flexibility of prepaid wireless service. Born, raised, and educated in Seattle, Washington, Cheryl packed her bags after graduation, heading south to start her marketing career in Los Angeles. And what a career it has been. Prior to Verizon Value, Cheryl held senior roles at companies that include Initiative, Coca-Cola, Taco Bell, Mattel, Google, and TikTok. Cheryl Gresham stops by to chat about growing up in Seattle, her time in the agency world, working for some of the biggest global brands, and leading marketing for Verizon Value.
Verizon Value is a new group within Verizon that is part of the Verizon's consumer group. And we are built to serve a really diverse needs of many different customers who are definitely focused on value, who are looking for flexibility in the prepaid part of the wireless space, and different ways of connecting with Verizon as well through different distribution channels. So Verizon now has a variety of different brands, from Visible to TracFone to Straight Talk to Total by Verizon. And so we brought all those brands together into this Verizon Value portfolio to help focus on this important part of the category and these important consumers to make sure that we're connecting with them in the best and right ways.
Cheryl, thank you so much for stopping by today. I'm looking very much forward to our chat. Let's go back to the beginning. Where are you from?
I am from Seattle, Washington, born and raised, lots of family, extended family, and generations coming out of Seattle.
And so you spent your entire life in Washington State, correct? Because you even went to university there.
You know, I did. I born and raised there, went to University of Washington in Seattle. And then I decided to go and look for some sunshine in Southern California. So I have lived in Southern California for some time and just actually made a pivot back to Seattle, Washington recently. So I've spent probably about half my life in Washington State and half my life in California.
Did you have any hobbies growing up? Like, what kept you busy?
Oh gosh, you know what kept me busy? I really enjoyed playing soccer. I loved, I loved it. It was a good outlet for me. I was very competitive, maybe sometimes a little aggressive. I was definitely called bossy probably when I was about 5 years old. But I loved playing soccer growing up as a kid. And, just all the kid stuff. I remember riding bikes, playing with the neighbors, and and I loved music too, listening to music. I was not a good musician by any means, but really enjoyed playing soccer most of my, elementary and into middle school. And then I paused.
Are you a soccer fan right now? Like, if the Seattle Sounders are I guess playing LAFC or the LA Galaxy, do you pick a side or do you abstain from that?
You know, it's so funny. We have this trouble in my household. I would say in that scenario, and I'm not going to make a lot of friends here, but I would probably root for LAFC. I've been to more games probably, so I feel more connected with that team. But things change over time, and you can always have two teams you root for.
Did you have any influences growing up, like anyone you looked up to within your family, maybe pop culture?
I really looked up to, I was the oldest child. And so I looked up to, just sort of, some people who were just closer to me in age, but were older than me. So a cousin, a cousin, I looked up to her quite a bit. One of our family friends looked up to, in terms of a personal circle as a child. And, I just thought they were the coolest people. And in terms of, goodness, pop culture, I mean, everyone from Madonna. Oh my goodness, I'm really going back. Belinda Carlisle. She was, I believe she was in the Go-Go's, and then she went out on her own. And I thought she was pretty cool. But definitely, loved that whole phase, and loved you too, the band. I mean, now I'm going down a music route, but those were probably, the pop culture folks I looked up to. But really, it was, family and friends, really, but older females in my family and friends circle was probably who I was looking at for, advice, mentorship, just wanting to be like them when I grew up.
What was your first job ever?
Oh goodness, it depends if babysitting counts, because I know a lot of times it doesn't
It definitely counts, sir.
necessarily.
I can tell you a number of my past guests have all gotten their start in babysitting. But what was, I guess, let me put it this way to you. What was the first job you ever had where you had to pay taxes?
It's funny. I worked at an ice cream shop. So, and it was one of the most fun times and just perfect sort of time of life job. I worked at this ice cream shop in an area called Edmonds outside of Seattle, and it was right next to a ferry boat, and just a great, summer job. And ended up getting one of my best friends a job there as well. And then we ended up getting some other friends their jobs there. So it was one of those things where you were going to work every day, but you had a lot of friends around you, and just sort of, I would say it was a pretty ideal first job for a 16-year-old.
What did you learn about yourself from that first job? Because depending on what the ice cream parlor was like,
Right.
I mean, it could have been a pressure cooker. Like
Oh,
sometimes those places
yes.
get very busy. So
Right.
did you learn about how well you perform under stress or how to deal with stress? Was that your first time really dealing with stress from a professional standpoint?
It's funny that you say this, because I've never thought of it that way. But when you bring this up, I actually remember those days of like the line out the door, and we had to hand make the waffle cones, and then if somebody ordered a shake, it slowed everything down. And I remember the stress and pressure, but I also remember just sort of like there was like a dial that turned on me that was like, okay, we gotta move. Let's go. And so I would say it was probably truthfully the, first outside, work experience where there was, pressure and juggling of different responsibilities, and having to maintain, a friendly face to the customers that we were serving. So yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but absolutely, I think that's something that probably helped tee me up for the future.
Oh yeah, there's no stress in marketing, that's for sure.
Right, right, right,
Nothing at all,
right.
especially nowadays.
Exactly, exactly.
Why did you decide to stay local and go to the University of Washington in Seattle?
It's one of those fun things I think parents do. I've thought about that before, especially with seeing kids today. I applied for 15 schools. I applied for one, and I remember my doctor growing up was nearby the University of Washington, and so as a kid, I remember like when we'd go to the doctor, my parents would take me to the campus and they'd walk me around, and they would say things like, see, you're going to go here someday, you might live here someday. Knowing my dad even better now, I would call it probably he was brainwashing me. But it was just sort of, it was sort of just a known, piece of my life that I would go to high school and then I would go to University of Washington. So, like I said, a backup school was like, no, this is where I will go. So, it was something that I thought was great, and it was great. And, it's a great school, strong school. It was, away from home, yet close to home. So I really enjoyed my time there, but it is interesting as I look at others and see, certainly other people's journeys of how they go to, school now after high school. I was laser focused on one school.
And you studied, correct me if I'm wrong, was it mass communications there?
Yes.
Why that program?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot actually. My very first, I'd say, introduction into marketing, I think I was a junior in high school, and I took a class that I don't remember the name of, but I think this program still exists. It was called DECA, DECA, and it was an organization, at least how it was taught at our school, that like taught kids about marketing and entrepreneurship. And I remember I loved the teacher, and his name is Gary Olson. And it was a great class. It was a hard class to get into for a high school class. They had limited spots, and so you knew you were sort of lucky if you got into the class. But we started learning about it then and there. And I remember the first time I ever heard anyone talk about like demographics and targeting and audiences and all of that. I really like zeroed in again on like that was something that was really interesting to me. So I think it started there. And then, I got to the University of Washington, and, we did not have to declare a major coming in. It was something that you sort of got to sort out yourself, and, took different classes, and, leaned into communications. So I knew that, that was something I could do. It would give me some flexibility, some choice, and, get me closer to where I wanted to be in marketing. So it was, it lined up well. But I've always, I remember that day. I can see myself sitting in the classroom when they started talking about this. And I just remember being like, this is fascinating. I just thought it was so interesting. So that's how it happened.
Did you already know where you wanted to be? Because I found when I was in university, and I bet you and I pretty much were in university, give or take the same time, but I found that people, if they weren't going to continue into graduate education, what they wanted to do was work at a certain place. Like they weren't thinking, I'm going to be the CMO. They're going to be like, this is my favorite company, and it feels like if I work there, regardless of what the position is, it won't feel like work.
I did not. I think I took a little bit of a different path, in all honesty. When I was coming out of school, the economy wasn't great. It was it was just one of those times, right? It sort of like sets you on a path, which way you go. And when I was coming out of school, I had interviewed at a lot of different companies, but I wasn't still really sure what I was going to do. And I eventually decided, that I wanted to move to Southern California. And so, my very, very first job when I got there was a role at a brand company. That's where I ended up. But I did not, to answer your question more directly, I did not have a laser target on a specific company or companies I wanted to work at. I just knew what I wanted to do. And so it was a matter of finding the right place to do that at.
And after graduation, you jumped right into the agency world and with a juggernaut too under the IPG banner initiative. So how did you find that role
Yeah.
coming out of university? And
Well,
was
so
this role in LA as well?
what's interesting is when I transitioned down to LA, I actually, before Initiative, had a job for 2.5 months at this brand company. And it was privately owned. And it was a fascinating company. Pharmaceutical companies would hire us to develop, consumer-facing names for the drugs. And the process that we went through, the trademarks, all of that, it was really interesting. I was only there 2.5 months. It was a pretty crazy environment. I left quickly, and it was a privately owned company, and I will just say that the owner was he was known for throwing things at the wall, cursing, and I just one day I remember I had like no money and didn't really know what I was going to do next, but I just remember thinking I can't work in an environment like this, and I quit on the spot and walked out. So it's anyway. So then you asked, how did I get to IPG? The good news was my now husband, but boyfriend at the time, worked in the advertising industry. And he had met with a bunch of clients one day And I remember, I told him, I'm like, I don't know that this brand job I have is really a good place for me to be. This was before I quit. And he's like, you should check these people out. And he just honestly handed me a business card. So after I left the brand company, I looked into initiative, and oftentimes there's a lot of entry level roles, right, at agencies, and I was definitely entry level at the time. I applied. I applied for an assistant media planner role, and it was pretty funny. I remember I was sort of starstruck because the agency offices were on Sunset Boulevard, and being near, new to Los Angeles, to, go into an interview in a building on Sunset was just, felt really, really like a fun and important thing. And I remember they gave me a math test, which I thought was funny. But I remember talking to the woman who eventually became my boss. She's like, math is a lot of the job, and we need to make sure that we have people good at math. So it's funny. I don't know if they still interview folks like that today for that role, but I ended up getting the role, and that's how I got in.
I want to take a quick step back. So when you landed in LA, you had spent your entire life in Seattle, and your very first job, which it's your first
Yes.
impression of working in LA, doesn't go very
Yes.
well. Was there a point where you were like, this place is crazy, or you were questioning your life decisions? Were you thinking about packing your bag and going back to Seattle? Like, was there any sort of culture shock in and around that?
I mean, goodness, yes. It's so funny now too, because it feels so long ago, but I remember the building was on the backside of Beverly Hills High School. And I remember, being, from not California, how so many of us grow up in the world watching television, film, et cetera. And, so many of these places are just iconic and well known. And anyway, I remember seeing Beverly Hills High School, thinking that was so cool. And my building was on the backside of it. And I would say it didn't, though. It culture shock a little bit, yes, but it didn't make me doubt the decision to be there. I just knew I'd gotten into a bad situation that, I corrected. And I actually, I remember I was scared. I was so scared to quit, at that time, without having a job, without having, income, established. But I just knew, it was not a good place to be. So it didn't make me question, though, my decision, and honestly just made me probably more excited to join Initiative. And, a strong, strong company with a history and great reputation, and really, obviously great leaders and great people that I met and, still friends with today.
After Initiative, you went to Davis Ellen, but then you did a stint at Coca-Cola as a brand manager. But then you
Right.
came back to both of those agencies. So take us through what that experience was like at Coca-Cola, actually going client side, and then what did you
Going
learn from
back.
that role going back? And
Right.
did it make you a stronger agency employee? Obviously, it did because you went on to more senior roles. But it's funny because I don't see a lot of people really once they go brand side, they tend not to come back to the agency world. It's like brand side is their
Yeah.
exit strategy.
Right, 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 right. Well, it's interesting because I was still, very early in my career. And I will tell you, I was really excited to go work for Coca-Cola. And I just loved it. I still talk about it to this day. I learned so much, and it's such a great, great company. But what I also knew was, to be blunt, I was driven, and I wanted to grow, and I wanted to achieve. And another person who was my manager at Coca-Cola, I remember, after I'd been there a while, I went in her office, and we were at Coca-Cola, mind you, in Los Angeles, which most people, obviously think about Atlanta as Coca-Cola, but they had an office in LA, where we all were. And I remember going into my manager's office after, I'd been there a while and I'd had some success. And I pitched her and I said, hey, I've done this, and this. Here are all my accomplishments. Here are all the great things I've done. Here's what I want to do. I thought I had a good assessment of myself. And I let her know that, I wanted a promotion, and how do I get there? And what I so appreciate about what she said to me, but was, a big reason of why I sort of pivoted. It wasn't the only reason, but why I ended up pivoting partly was I remember she said to me, here's the deal. She was, complimentary, nice, etc. But she said, there's no way for you to get a promotion. She basically told me there's this many level X's in this office and this many level Y's. So unless one of those people out there quit and leave, or you're willing to move to Atlanta or wherever else, Coca-Cola may want to put you, you're not getting promoted. And it was pretty sobering. But it was also the honesty, that I appreciated of like, it's someone's career. And, it's interesting. Obviously I did end up moving on, not just for that reason there, but, the women that she was referencing that were in the higher level role that she had said, like, they'll have to leave for you to get promoted. I think, and I'm still in touch with a couple of them, I think at least 10 years passed before they moved on. And it gave me the visibility and understanding that sometimes promotions don't just happen because you're really good at what you do. But this, it introduced me to this idea of, headcount and headcount at certain levels. And, Coke was very much into succession planning, but, it was sort of probably an early exposure to, how big corporations work and plan and resource their teams. So, that happened. And then what else happened was, my manager from Initiative ended up calling me, and she was new at Davis Ellen, and she called me and wanted me to come and work on a different client there in a more senior role, and to have sort of some of that growth opportunity. And again, who we work with and for is just so critical, in terms of your success, as well as your happiness. I think that it was an, really great opportunity. It didn't happen immediately at the same time I heard about, the resources sort of assigned to the LA office for Coca-Cola, but it came, after that discussion. So I think I was more clear-eyed on, gosh, well, do I want to move to Atlanta? And, I knew that, at that time in my life, the decision was no. And so it sort of became like, okay, well, am I going to stay here for 10 or more years, waiting for someone to move on? Or, am I going to sort of, chart out and find a new path? And so all of that coming together, I think, helped lead me to, what became my next role.
And you made the pivot back into client side or brand side. A lot of great companies here, but the first two I just want to touch on very quickly, Taco Bell and Mattel, two companies I would kill to work for. Not that I'm saying I don't enjoy my current job. Okay, by the way, I'm going to ask you this question. Are you the person that invented the Dorito taco? Because if you are, there is a nice place in heaven for you.
No, I did not. I will say, I'm pretty sure they claimed it. So I do know who did do it, and they're doing pretty well. I'll say that, but they are doing just fine. But no, I was lucky enough to be part of an incredible team that launched that, and that was probably one of the highlights of my career professionally, but also personally. Really had great time working at Taco Bell.
You also did stints at both Google and TikTok.
Yes.
One side of those businesses that I wanted to speak to or just ask you about was the political side of them, because Taco Bell and Mattel, they don't have to speak before Congress. But,
Right.
but Google and TikTok, they have to go back and justify what they're doing It seems like it happens a couple times a year. Sometimes it seems like Congress wants to get something done, and other times maybe it's a little bit of showboating. So how did that impact how you led marketing for both of those organizations? Because you had to have one eye on what was going on in the political sphere while you were putting together plans to engage just the general populace.
I mean, obviously it was very interesting, fascinating. And, I do feel, it doesn't get any more crazy probably than, the political climate around TikTok. But I'll say, at my time at YouTube and Google, it was, that definitely was happening. And there was a lot of, eyes and regulation and, all sorts of stuff. I will tell you, being an employee of Google, I made me a fan of Google even more. And what I mean by that is, just their discipline in ensuring that they're doing the right thing. I really have a lot of respect for the company. But in terms of how it made me think from a marketing perspective, I mean, it's interesting. We had work that we did because we needed to show and tell the story of the value that YouTube brings to people's lives. And there was a lot going on, and continues to go on in the space around how some of these platforms are not quote unquote good for the world. But we had the opportunity to talk about what was happening on the platform that was good, and how do we reach people to be able to tell those stories and help legislators and decision makers hear that story as well, and see the positive things that the company brings into the world. And so it's interesting being part of a marketing team that is accountable and responsible for doing that and helping. And you work cross-functionally, you work with a lot of different folks in the organization to help showcase the good things about the platform. And and certainly at TikTok, I'd say it's probably in a different, certainly it was a different space because of the whole Trump ban and being an employee of TikTok through that time. That was a very different experience than being an employee at YouTube. When Sundar Pichai needs to go testify in front of Congress, having the president of the United States saying they're going to ban the platform. Very, very different experiences, and different ways of working, and different needs of what marketing needed to do. I hope that helps answer the question.
So let's bring this full circle to your role here at Verizon. It didn't start with Verizon Value, though, did it? It started with another division of Verizon called Visible.
So when looking for, my next role post TikTok, I happened to get a call from Verizon, and there it was, a recruiter, and someone had reached out to me about an opportunity to come and work on this digitally focused, digitally led wireless company. And I really thought and looked at it as that, what I had been doing in recent years, focusing on millennials, focusing on Gen Z, and even, focusing on even younger, when I was at Mattel, I think it had helped prepare me to, think about how does wireless look, and how does wireless marketing look, 10 years from now in the future. And, that was what was really compelling to me about coming into Visible, was that Verizon was thinking about how they were going to, interact and build for the future customers now. And so Visible was an opportunity to look at it differently. And, with Visible, it's all digital. So you sign up for the service online through an app, and everything you do is online and through the app. There's no stores. There are no 1-800 numbers. Service is done through chat, if needed. And it was almost like more what I would call a subscription model, where, similar to Netflix, once you sign up for Visible, You just, put all your information in, and then you're debited once a month, just like Netflix, and, you continue your service. And as a result of that, we were able to, and the team that built Visible in the early days was able to establish this great product, bringing all the benefits in for, this digital forward, very comfortable person in a digital space, all the benefits they need, like, talk and text are obviously table stakes, but unlimited data, not worrying about if they're going to have a hotspot or not. Brought that all into the platform, and then, offered it at a really compelling price that, didn't have, additional taxes and fees. And, you just know every month exactly to the penny what your bill is going to be. And it doesn't vary. And so all of that to say, I thought between, my marketing experience with reaching young audiences, the digital experience that I was, lucky enough to gain from working at both TikTok and YouTube, I think it brought me together with a great company like Verizon and Visible to be able to figure out and say, okay, how are we going to do this? And how are we going to bring this to people who will value it in a really compelling way? And it's been an incredible experience. And Visible's just been having some great growth and great success.
How did the internal move to Verizon Value come about? Was it something that you saw that you pushed for, or did you just get a phone call or an email one day from someone going, Cheryl, we have an assignment that we've got you in mind for?
So it's interesting. So around the time I started with Visible, Verizon was making news, and they had acquired TracFone. And, for folks who may have heard of TracFone, they might think of one specific type of phone. But TracFones actually was a company based down in Miami, and they have a bunch of different brands under their, company umbrella. Straight Talk, Simple Mobile, a company called Total, which we've now rebranded Total by Verizon, TracFone, of course, Walmart Family Mobile. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so when Verizon acquired TracFone, that was right around the same time I was coming into lead marketing for Visible. So, everything sort of stayed status quo. I was aware of the TracFone acquisition. And, what it did for Verizon was really gave Verizon an opportunity to start, serving a much broader audience and, group of people that Verizon, what we in the industry refer to as postpaid, that Verizon postpaid was not serving at the time. And so anyway, over time, the company decided to bring all of these brands together under the Verizon Value portfolio. So it's interesting, but just, going back to a Coca-Cola or a Mattel, for example, at Mattel, we had what we called boys, girls, and games. But, if you had Barbie and Monster High and American Girl, those were all in one group. And, at Coca-Cola, we had, when I was there, and I'm sure both of these companies have changed how they categorize it now, but, when I was there, we called them CSDs, waters, teas. And so to bring this into Verizon and say, hey, we're going to have this category over here that we're going to call Verizon Value, it was familiar to me in a way that, I was like, oh, okay, I know how this works. I know how we're going to do this. And so, even though it's a completely, obviously very, very different product and category overall, but they brought it all together and started building a team around it. And so they put my boss, Angie Klein, in the role of president and CEO of the group, and started building out, a larger multi-brand group. So this role became available, and it was something I went out for. And, it was something that I, had a lot of discussions with leadership and other people and, cross-functional partners with, but something that I definitely was really excited about because I thought it was just a really great opportunity for Verizon, like I've said, to bring more solutions to different customers in very different places. We, have distribution in what we call indirect channels, where it might be a privately owned, shop in the middle of Manhattan that someone sells a lot of different products in. And then we have, our owned stores like Total by Verizon. And then we partner with, Walmart specifically on Straight Talk, for example. And so, depending on, who you are, one of those places may be the best place for you to go get your wireless service. And so I love about Verizon Value that it brings the Verizon network and makes it accessible to people, to be blunt, no matter where they are and where they shop and what feels most comfortable and familiar to them. And, in different ways of payment and service and everything. So it's been a great move, and really just, exciting times for us to build all of this out.
Okay, just looking at the number of different brands that you oversee, how do you manage all of that? Like, do you have brand managers or brand VPs that report
Yes.
directly into you? And is there a specific brand that might be your baby? Because we hear about this all the time we hear about this from leaders who
Right.
oversee a multitude of projects, but you find that there was one thing that was their baby. Like for Steve Jobs, I actually think it was the iPhone. That was his baby that he
Oh,
always stayed very close to. Whereas
yeah.
other people like John Ives had more control over the iPod at the time, or maybe the new MacBook Pro. Is that the same thing with yourself too? Is like there one brand that you're a little bit more closer to?
Yeah, it's interesting because I am a mom and I have more than one child, so I totally get this question. And here's what I'll say: I am very familiar, obviously, with Visible, having worked there, solely focused on Visible for a while. I'm still getting to know my new ones, and they are so different from one another, which is good actually, and that's what we want to make sure that we're doing is serving different people with different needs, which with each of them. But obviously, longevity. I've had the most time on Visible, but it's really interesting, just even personally. It's personally fulfilling and interesting and satisfying to learn more about who these other services satisfy and work for, and like, again, how we make sure that we're connecting with consumers and distributing it. And so I wouldn't say I have a favorite baby, but I've definitely spent the most time with Visible, and we've definitely done a lot of things that make me smile. But as we talk about Straight Talk, Total by Verizon, we're doing some really great stuff there. We're opening local stores in people's neighborhoods, so you're going to see a lot more about that, and that's where I'm definitely spending a lot of time these days.
Did Visible see an uptick in subscribers during the pandemic? And I asked that question because we're all in lockdown. We're discouraged from getting close to each other. Stores are closed as well. And it just seems like the Visible business model was, I guess, by chance built for the pandemic. Anyone that was phone shopping or looking for a new service or plan during that time.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. They launched pre-pandemic, and it's interesting. Someone posted the other day, who was there at the very beginning. He said, I think in the first 7 months, the subscriptions did not equal like the past 2 days or something. And it just shows like the ramp, of any new business, of course, but definitely growth during the pandemic, and definitely growth, now. I would even say the category has evolved so much just even in the past couple of years that we are seeing a lot of growth there. And it's exciting. And I think people, and specific to Visible, I think that's really was the plan of what type of wireless service was going to be there to be able to meet the needs of the future. And I think as we get closer and closer to that future, we're seeing that it's definitely picking up steam, and it's exciting to watch, and it's exciting to, when I first told people I was leaving TikTok, which, everybody wanted to talk to you about, to going to Visible, they were like, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. And so it's fun that, people are starting to get more familiar with the brand, and once you're able to talk about it and, share what it's all about, a lot of times it's very convincing. So it's really been fun to see, the success, continue to, try and keep it going. That's the job. You got to keep it going.
Before we jump to rapid fire questions, I want to ask you one last question. So we know that the pandemic changed the way marketing was done, at least during the pandemic. But how is marketing different now from the way it was pre-pandemic? So have things changed as
Oh,
we've come out of the lockdown? Like, are you looking back and going, okay, you know what? Everyone thought that once we got out of this, it'd come back to 2019, early 2020. But are there things that are ultimately different from the pre-pandemic era?
oh gosh, it's a good question. I think, one of the things that stands out to me so much is connected TV, the growth and adoption rate of that. I was meeting with our media agency the other day, and I haven't heard this term before, but I think they call it FAST for connected TV. And
Oh,
it's,
free ad-supported television.
thank you. Yes. What I find so interesting, because, if you think about it, when we went into the pandemic, many of us had Netflix. We certainly were all adopting TikTok, and, that was fun. That was fun. But, everybody got a lot more comfortable with everything from QR codes. I mean, right? Remember, QR codes were like dead. And now
Oh God,
everyone
that was
knows how to use
crazy
QR
how they came.
codes,
I know they came
right?
roaring back. Like
Like,
one of the things that I used to laugh about with QR codes was companies would put it on their posters in the subway stations where there was no reception. And I'm just like, what am I supposed to do with this here?
oh, I
It's like,
love it.
yeah.
Right, right.
And now
But yeah,
everything's got a QR code. You can't go to a restaurant without the menu being a QR code.
exactly. It is, and, and people who maybe you wouldn't have expected because of their, age or place in life, to know how to use a QR code. They know how to use a QR code now. So that's a funny one. But I will say, I think, a lot of people had Netflix, people had Hulu. But I think what's interesting to me is the rise of the connected TV and the free ad supported TV, right? And that's something, that I think is actually really great, because all of those subscriptions, they add up. And, if some of the big streamers like Netflix and others have their way of, kicking off all the members who are sharing their passwords, it's going to start, costing people a lot more if they want to continue to use those services. And I think it's great that there are opportunities for people who may not want to spend their money on the subscriptions to be able to use those free platforms. So I think overall, connected TV is one that I think has just grown and grown and grown, and probably was catapulted as a result of the pandemic. I'd say probably that one. And you can't not say TikTok. I mean, TikTok just, being there during that time was fascinating, and being part of a juggernaut. But the adoption of TikTok, and I remember it was so fun when I first got there. We were working with, some partners, and we were telling them that we wanted to target people who were 25 and up. That was, our marketing was focused on 25 and up. And I remember one of the leads at the agency said, he goes, I don't know that I've ever worked on a client before that is trying to age up. And it was, just really funny, because if you go back in time and think about what TikTok might have been pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and now post-pandemic, you think about that one. It was, it was little kids and dancing. And, I remember, when I was, part of the team there, and we talked about this idea of you check Twitter or you check Instagram but just the vernacular people use or the language people use to describe it. You don't hear anyone say, I'm going to go check TikTok. They say, I'm going to go watch TikTok. And I think that, along with YouTube and its evolution as well of people have a different, I don't know, way of thinking about these platforms now post pandemic than they did before, where, you're streaming it on your, living room television. So I'd say probably connected TV, and then, what maybe in the past were considered, quote unquote, social apps. But, now they're in your living room on your big TV. Those two areas I think have really changed quite significantly.
Cheryl, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Yes.
Okay. The campaign you are most proud of?
It's funny being a mom of two. There's most proud of for different ways. So I would say I mentioned Doritos Locos Tacos in the past. It was wonderful, great. Like if you could do a case study in, MBA school about how to, do great marketing and just have all the levers firing and all the teams and operations and everything successful and working well, I would say Doritos Locos Tacos. But, on a smaller level, more recently, I'll tell you, it's probably something we call it Blue World at Visible, but there was some work that was done, and I'll be candid, it was just one video. The story behind why I'm proud of it is that it was something no one thought could be done. And I remember, hearing all these reasons why we couldn't create something that we, needed to create from a responsive stance quickly. And I think, through that video that we created, and we ran it on, digital platforms and linear platforms, it did two things. That helped turn around the business, but it also, I think, helped turn around the marketing team and our agency's perspectives on what could be done and what we were capable of. And so it might sound corny, but I love that one from like the way it made the people who worked on it, the way it made them feel about their own capabilities.
Your favorite movie?
I love, it's an old one. It's called Lost in Translation. Bill Murray, Scarlett Johansson, probably early 2000s. He's in Tokyo, if you remember or saw that one. If you haven't.
No, I do remember this film. Yeah. No, that was. Didn't he get nominated for an Oscar for that?
I think he did. I
Yeah.
just loved it. I don't know what it was, but I just think it's, I mean, there's so many good movies. I love movies, but Titanic, right? Like Pretty in Pink. I mean, so many. E.T. Oh gosh, what's the other one? The Russell Crowe one, Gladiator, right? I mean, so many. I do love movies, but Lost in Translation is one that I definitely it's the type of movie that you think about. It keeps you thinking.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
Oh goodness, I would say, I identify with, I think her name is Julie Bowen. She was the mom on Modern Family. If you are familiar with that TV series.
I'm familiar with the show. I didn't watch it as intently.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Ed O'Neill's the one that sticks out for me, and Sofia Vergara.
Yes. She was the blonde on the show, and she's a twin mom. I'm also a twin mom, and I just thought her character was hilarious. So she might be someone fun to play me.
My follow-up, if Hollywood were to make that movie based on your life story, what would you call it?
I don't know if I can borrow a name. I'm just thinking of other names of movies or books or something I know, but
it's your movie. You can call it whatever you want.
I just think about the difference of my life and, my journey, my journey so far, between living, in a place like Seattle and living in a place like Southern California. So, maybe A Tale of Two Cities.
Your favorite book?
You know what? It's so bad. I do audiobooks. So if that counts,
It definitely counts. Come on, we're on a podcast here.
I
Spoken
know,
word
right?
is
I was
king.
going to say, I do audiobooks and podcasts all the time, even when I'm like in my house. I feel like I need to give you something really deep. I'll tell you the past two that I have listened to. One was Andy Cohen's latest book on fatherhood. And I also recently have listened to the Prince Harry book. So those are probably my two recent. I don't know that they're my favorite, but those are my two recent that I've listened to.
Your favorite song?
You know what? It's U2, and it is City of Blinding Lights.
The best advice you have ever received?
Professionally, I would say best advice I received was from a prior, CMO who I worked for. And it really resonated with me as I was growing up, in the business. And I remember I went into a new role and she asked me how I was doing. And, I sort of opened up and said, oh, you're supposed to know everything. And I just don't know everything. And I remember she laughed and said to me, you don't have to know everything. And it sounds so simple, but I thought I just, to this day, I remind myself of that from time to time. And she shared, obviously, we need to find solutions. We need to be curious. We need to ask questions, but just because you're in the role you are doesn't mean that you're the smartest person in the room on the topic. And encouraged continuing to learn, continuing to challenge, and you don't have to know everything. So I like that piece of advice.
My signature closing question: if you weren't in marketing, what would you be doing and why?
I probably would have gone to Washington, D.C. and worked in politics. And I always had this idea of doing speech writing. I loved in college, that space and the writing and persuasive writing, connects to marketing also. But I think about that, about speech writing and, how we influence others, from a political standpoint through words. So I think that younger version of myself probably thinks about that now. But if I wasn't working, I'm thinking a lot about Hawaii these days and being on a beach in Hawaii. So, summer vacation's coming up. So that's where my headspace is at this moment.
Cheryl, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you so much as well.
That's it for today's show. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca, your favorite podcast platform, or youtube.com/@mediapeoplepodcast. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram @VicGenova.